All right, welcome everybody. Welcome to the Moving Maine Network Mobility Learning Community, and I'm very excited to have folks here today. We do like to do a brief intro about who we are and what we're doing here today. So I'm going to go ahead and hopefully, if I can get my slides share to go. Sorry. Oops. All right. So we wanted to just ground us that we are, this is one of our regular mobility learning community sessions, and we like to start it off by doing just a little bit of housekeeping, and then we'll get into the presentation. But our topic today is understanding Maine's white cane law and the rights of blind pedestrians. And so for folks who haven't been part of one of these before, we just a little bit about Moving Maine. We're focused on building an interconnected movement to ensure transportation access and equity for every person in Maine. And this slide has an image of an older woman and a little kiddo in a stroller on a bus together and making a connection. And I think that's a big part of what we believe is possible with a better transportation system, that it's not just about getting places, but it's also about building connections in our community. And we envision a Maine where all people have access to transportation, regardless of their background, their destination, or their geography. Our role is, and I'm not sure, is it going to my next slide? Are you seeing our role? No, I don't know why that's happening. Okay, here we go. I think that's good now. So we offer a forum for learning, connection, and action, and we make that open to everyone who's interested in supporting better transportation in Maine. And so we are excited to have all different types of folks here today. And we especially want to engage people who experience transportation barriers. And I'm just aware that I jumped past the housekeeping, but I did just want to mention that we asked people one more time, if you missed it, that we're asking people to refrain from using the chat. When we do get to the question and answer portion, we can use that if that's a tool that is helpful to folks, but otherwise we're asking that people don't use the chat. So we focus on advancing rides to opportunity and community. We also focus on safe and accessible streets and roads. And then we're really looking to make an impact on policies and practices that impact the most number of people. So focusing on that policy level. And for the learning community, we hope that you will build relationships with one another through these sessions. We want to offer a place to cultivate community. So if there's somebody that you encounter today and you want to follow up with, we love that and are here to support it. Our goal is for people to share expertise, and that can come in a lot of different forms, especially the expertise of lived experience. And we really want to help support moving to action on transportation solutions. So it was pretty exciting to have the work today to make this session happen result in already some interesting actions. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go along. So I want to get us into our session today. And the way we're going to approach this today is we have kind of we have a fairly large cast of characters who will be part of the conversation. They are prepared to be called on at different points. And so we'll go through a couple different aspects of this topic. And then we'll have time for questions and answers. And so one of the first things we wanted to do is ground us in what is this, what is the white cane law? And so we did a little bit of homework and had some help from a few of our partners to do that. And so I'm going to go ahead and share a couple of slides and walk us through this. Okay. So, part of why we're here today is because we have heard that and understand that this is not a well-known law. And so we wanted to start with, what even is it? And so, in a nutshell, Maine's white cane law ensures that people who are blind or visually impaired have the same rights to public spaces and transportation as everyone else. So essentially, the law requires drivers to yield the right of way to visually impaired pedestrians carrying a white cane or using a guide dog. And so on this slide, we have the language from the statute itself. We will share these slides out after the session to folks as part of our show notes for today. So from the state driver's manual, sorry, I'm trying to reference a couple different things here. Okay, from the state driver's manual, which is a shot at making the language a little simpler, states that a person who is blind or visually impaired may use a white cane as a means for safe and independent travel. So this person may also be led by a guide dog. In either case, this person always has the right of way. If you see anyone in the roadway with a white cane or guide dog, stop at least 10 feet away until the person is out of danger. An operator who fails to yield the right of way to a visually impaired person is liable for a traffic infraction with a minimum of $50 and a maximum of $1,000 fine. So we did have a great conversation with our friends from the state police who were not able to join us today because of things that are going on around Maine. And so a couple things that are kind of important to note here that we share on this slide is that officers are bound to follow state statute, not what is in the driver's manual. However, they can use the manual as input regarding what drivers are counseled. And usually they're only issuing one citation to a motorist, and that's up to the officer's discretion. And they are instructed to pick the most appropriate section of the law to ticket. So the point there is there may be times where someone was violating the white cane law, but that didn't show up in the citation that's on the record. If a motorist violated other laws, in addition to the white cane law, the officer might cite the motorist for one of the other laws. And so you wouldn't know from the record who had also violated the white cane law. Because in particular, they might go with citing the law with the higher fine. And ultimately, this is from Lieutenant Bruce Scott, the troop commander with the Maine State Police Traffic Safety Unit. And part of what he shared is that failure to yield is a tough statute because it usually requires some kind of contact, a crash. Similar to this is following too closely in the statute. And it's very relative depending on the speed of traffic. So it depends to a large extent on the officer's discretion. So the data that we have from the Maine State Police is that since this became a law, 0 tickets have included a citation for violating the white cane law in the new e-ticket system. And there have been 156 tickets and 280 warnings for failure to yield to pedestrian in a marked crosswalk. So that clearly is being used more, and there may be some white cane law violations mixed in there. There have been 8 tickets and 18 warnings for failure to yield to pedestrians on sidewalks, and 3 tickets, and we're not sure how many warnings for failure to exercise due care to avoid colliding with a pedestrian. And actually, Sarah, maybe you could come off mute and just remind me, what year did that e-ticket system start? Do you know off the top of your head?
Yeah, I just want to be clear, and actually Chris Ireland will have a little bit more data.
Oh, and here we
The-
go. It says it on the next slide.
yeah, it started in 2020. So Lieutenant Scott was saying we've had 0 uses of the white cane citation in the state system since 2020. And that, again, you can speak to the next paragraph. What percentage?
Great. So 1/3 of Maine law enforcement agencies use the e-ticket system, but they produce 2/3 of the total tickets. And so there's a reduced number of law enforcement officers in Maine since COVID, and currently about 2,500 officers total in the state and 145 total agencies. So if you added approximately 30% to the data provided on pedestrian safety law violations, the number would likely be representative of all citations across the state. And that's just accounting for that we don't have the data for citations outside of that e-ticket, but we think it's on a similar trend. And the data doesn't include officers' notes, which they keep separately in case the ticket goes to court, and you would have to follow up on each citation with each officer to request notes. One more piece here, which is we have one more slide that is what's shared by AAA in their driver safety or driver training. And so on this slide, we have the AAA logo at the top, and their branding around their driver safety, keeping the keys, helping extend your safe driving career. And then it says pedestrian/visual impairment. And there's an image of a man standing with a white cane on, sort of looks like he's in a park, actually. And it says, what do you do when a blind person crosses the street? And then the answer says, always yield to visually impaired, in parentheses, blind people crossing a street. You must remain stopped until the person is safely crossed. Do not honk or wave the person on. Never pass another vehicle which is stopped. And then it lists out the language of the law below, which is the same as what I had shared earlier. So I'm gonna stop the share. And so now I'd like to get into, I'd like to bring Sadie Donnell on to talk a little bit. So Sadie, folks who've been on these before may know Sadie. Sadie lives in Gorham with her wife and has 2 adult children. She works for Maine Department of Labor and owns her own vending business. She's involved with a number of different advocacy efforts, including she's the president of the Pine Tree Guide Dog Users. And so, Sadie, we'd love to have you share about your experiences with trying to cross our streets.
Thank you, Zoe. I appreciate the introduction, and thank you for letting me be here today. And thank you all for joining. Being a blind and visually impaired person, or at least around where I live, can tend to be a real life game of Frogger. So basically, for those who may not have grown up in the 80s, Frogger was a video game where you try to avoid vehicles coming at you, and that's kind of what it feels like. Except in my case, all I have to go on is my hearing. And I think despite doing everything I can to be visible as a blind person, one of the big takeaways, I guess, is that folks don't always seem to recognize what a blind person looks like. And obviously, if I'm attempting to cross the street, part of that is that they are focusing on where they're going, as they should be. But in understanding the white cane law, and that part of the challenge for us is trying to cross the street, we are not always able to locate a crosswalk, obviously because of our vision impairments. So we may, and we may also need to cross the street in a location where there is no crosswalk, which happens to be the case for me where I live. The sidewalks where I live are on the opposite side of the street from where I live. I do live on a major road. It's a 2-lane road, but it's a route. So it is heavily traveled, especially during peak times of the day. I also live near the high school. So I try to avoid doing any crossings or walking in the morning when kids are literally screeching into school, and around 2:15 when they're literally screeching out of school. It's just safer for me that way. It's unfortunate, but that's kind of the way it is. But in general, I'm finding that I stand on the side of the road. I've got my dog in one hand. I've taken to my guide dog in one hand, I should specify, who has a traditional harness on, leather harness with a handle. And I have taken to holding a traditional white cane in the other hand. I will often hold that cane out parallel to my body. So, vertically in front of me with my arm extended, trying to sort of, the only image I can think is sort of the Lion King, where he's standing on the cliff and he's holding the lion out. I'm trying to do that with my cane. Here it is. I'm blind. Here it is. I've waved it around. There was an incident a couple weeks ago where I was trying to cross back to my house. I had my toes on the curb. I had my dog toes on the curb. I had been listening and listening and listening for traffic. I thought I was safe to go. And when I feel that I'm safe to go, what I've been doing is extending the cane horizontally in front of me with my arm extended in sort of a, I'm going to go, here I go, kind of motion. So I did that, and then a car started coming up quickly. And so I held the cane out in front of me thinking, oh, well, they'll see this and they know that I want to cross, so they'll stop for me. If I had not retracted that cane back to my side, the car would have hit the cane. They did not slow down. They did not attempt to stop. I'm not convinced they even saw the cane. I don't know. But if I had started to cross that street, I would not be here. I live in a 30-mile-an-hour zone. It's a straight stretch. So unfortunately, people are traveling generally much faster than that, unfortunately. If I had to guess, I'm not the greatest guesser, but if I had to guess, there are times when people are doing 60 through that stretch. It's scary sometimes. So, I had requested, I've talked to people, can I get a crosswalk, all these different things. It's a heavy lift sometimes. So I think for me, the big thing is to impart on motorists is put yourself in my shoes for a second, which I know in the seconds that you see a blind person, just stop. I mean, that's if you see a blind person, they're clearly on the side of the road and they're trying to cross the street, they're perpendicular to the street, just stop, just do the right thing and stop. Familiarize yourself with what a blind person looks like, what a white cane looks like, what a guide dog looks like. And it doesn't really matter. Just be a nice person. Let somebody cross the street. But in terms of blind folks in particular, you have to put yourselves in our shoes in the sense that we're only using our hearing to cross the street in most cases. So that is a complicated thing. So I have to listen for, are there cars coming? Have cars stopped? And the biggest part is what ambient noise is happening at this time that might, muddy that water, if you will. So did a dump truck just go by and it was really loud and it's still kind of going down the street? so I can't hear other cars. Is somebody mowing the lawn? Is there a car with loud music on? Is there other traffic? Like, what's going on that might prevent me from being able to hear well enough to make a great determination about crossing that street? And sometimes I have had to step back from the street crossing for a minute or two because there's just so much ambient noise. There was a couple big trucks, whatever it was. I'll kind of step back and say, I'm not even comfortable trying to do this right now. I'll just wait for it to quiet down, because the quieter the better. But with people having electric and hybrid cars that turn off when they come to a stop, I'm all for the environment, but it makes it really hard for us because we don't know that you're there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a big one. That graphic that you shared, Zoe says, don't honk, don't do this. Well, I do sort of agree with that in a sense, but I'm not going to listen. If you say it's safe to cross, that's cool, but I'm still going to make my own decision. I may still take a couple seconds to assess that situation. So if someone sort of like shouts to me from a car, "You're good to go," okay, cool. I might still hang for a second and just make sure that there's not a car coming in the other lane. Someone isn't being an idiot and passing, which has happened. There's a lot that goes on, and making sure that I actually make it all the way across the street before you start going, because, it can be disconcerting to have a car coming behind you. Also making sure that you come to a complete stop to let me cross the street, because guide dogs especially are trained that until that car is stopped, it is not safe. They are trained with intelligent disobedience. So if they feel like a car is coming at them, they will not go. You can give them the forward command, but they're not going to go if they feel like a car is still coming at them. And people tend to slow roll. So they're like, yeah, I'm letting you cross the street. I'm just going to keep kind of rolling forward. Well, the dog's not going to go. He thinks you're still coming, so he's not going. So you got to come to a complete stop, give us a little space if you can. And then make sure we make it all the way to the other side before you get going again. And try not to like take off in a big rush either, like just go for it. Don't like floor it, please. So those kind of things are things to take into account. Big problems are patience. Drivers don't seem to have a lot of patience. That's a big one.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sadie.
Yeah,
so we'll
absolutely.
come back to you.
Sure.
We'll come back to you again in a little bit, but now I wanted to go to Sharisse Roberts. So Sharisse has been working to support individuals with disabilities since 2000. In 2015, she joined the Maine Department of Labor, the Division for the Blind and Visually Impaired, and she has a passion for accessibility, outreach, collaboration, and technology. And so she is going to share a bit about how she and other folks in her program are able to support folks regarding the white cane law and in general. So Sharisse, take it away.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate having the opportunity to be here and speak to everybody. Thanks everybody for being here and being willing to listen to this conversation, because it is huge and it really does take a village and a team to make sure that our members of the community who are blind and visually impaired are able to travel safely and independently on a daily basis. So first off, I'm a certified orientation and mobility instructor, and I've been working in the field for over 10 years now with the Division for the Blind and Visually Impaired. And with the Division for the Blind and Visually Impaired, I know it's a mouthful. We usually use the acronym DBVI. Our services are at no cost to individuals who are blind and visually impaired to be able to access that travel training, that orientation and mobility training for members of the community, so that they can do all the things that Sadie just mentioned, right? That they can learn how to travel across those streets. They can learn how to analyze those sounds, analyze those risks, being able to listen for those masking sounds and make those decisions as to when is it, we don't necessarily say safe to cross, but when is it clear to cross, basically. And we just really want to make sure that people are aware of our services, because they can be kind of hidden. Most people don't necessarily know that we do exist. And we do partner with other agencies like the IRIS Network work. And we partner with Catholic Charities of Maine to be able to work with all ages, because we work with children, birth all the way until our older adults, end of life, in a variety of different capacities, not just orientation and mobility, but in a variety of different programs, including vocational rehabilitation, independent living, educational, and our transition age youth. And so really the big thing that I think is really important to note is that when we are working in the community, we're not only working with the client, but we're also working with our traffic engineers. We're trying to partner with our cities. We're trying to partner with other community groups. Pretty much anybody who's willing to kind of lend us an ear and listen to the concerns that our clients are having out there. As you know, Maine is a very diverse state. We work with a lot of clients that have access to sidewalks, but we also work with a lot of clients that do not have access to sidewalks. And as all of you know, living in this state, the weather changes on a dime, which means that year round, that travel opportunities, those environments are constantly changing. And clients have to be prepared for that, because they can't just say, oh, well, it's snowing today. Nobody's plowed the sidewalks. Guess I have to walk in, in the roadway today. Well, I'm just not going to go to work. No, they have to do that. They also have to learn to use alternative modes of transportation. And sometimes that means analyzing those street crossings and saying, like, well, this is not really a great place to cross, so I'm going to have to use something else. As we know, transportation is a challenge in many parts of the state, almost all parts of the state. So we're working with clients to be able to provide information and resources for them as well. Basically, with the white cane law, one of the things to note is that it's not protecting our clients in the sense of just within those sidewalks, right? Sadie kind of touched on that like the white cane law really does cover a person crossing at any point in time across a roadway, whether there is a designated sidewalk or not. Accessible pedestrian crossings, whether those are the rapid flashing beacons that we see, they need that accessibility component. They need the ability to know, well, when I push the button, is there a light that actually even turns on? How do I know when it turns on? Is it talking to me at all? Is it giving me any feedback? Is there a countdown timer? And how do I access that? Because visually, I can't access that. Those in the sighted world, we really get a lot of opportunity to be able to kind of take our vision for granted and just kind of mosey about our day. And so accessibility is a key component to making sure that our clients who are blind and visually impaired, our members of our community, are able to access things the same way as everybody else can, and that they can, again, move about independently and safely. So really, it is a challenge for sure. And CD touched on so many wonderful points of like what those challenges truly are, whether they're using a white cane, whether they're using a guide dog. It does touch in that white cane law on, what is the cane supposed to look like? But for most people, they don't necessarily know. There's been a lot of research out there that talks about like the different behaviors that Sadie talked about, whether you should flag your cane forward, upwards and downwards in front of your body, whether you should wear a caution vest, whether you should have a like flag in your hand and wave it around in the sky to kind of get people to pay attention to you and stop, whether you should wear certain colors. There's just great people in the field that are doing that kind of work to try to figure it out. And at the end of the day, they really came back and just said like, well, it's about education, right? If our community doesn't know, well, what is a white cane? What does that mean? What is a guide dog? What does that mean? And we go back to, our drivers and how they're being educated, and our BMV and how they're getting their driver's licenses, and, all of that type of stuff. And then working together as a team to be able to disseminate that information, then we can't really work as a team. We don't really know. People just don't realize. And so, as we know, drivers are very distracted. There's just a lot going on. People like to speed around stopped vehicles, which is a huge challenge when someone's like, okay, yeah, sure, go ahead. And then another car comes along and says, wait, why are you paused? Why are you stopped? I'm just going to go in that shoulder and I'm going to whip around and then I'm going to hit that pedestrian, whether they're blind or visually impaired, right? Anybody that's a pedestrian is at risk for those behaviors. And, speeding traffic, all of those types of things. So we do have to be keeping those things in mind because safety and independence is huge. And so I just, again, really appreciate the opportunity to share the message. And please, if you've never heard about us, please check out our website, maine.gov/rehab/DBVI.
Thank you so much, Sharisse. So now I'd like to bring in Chris Ireland and Tom Barron. And so Chris is the director of driver license services of the driver's license services division at the Maine Bureau of Motor Vehicles. He came into this role in 2021, and he's responsible for all business functions related to the life cycle of a driver. So including oversight of driver education, administering examinations. And so we'd love to hear from you, Chris, about, how does the state currently fit in education about the white cane law and other reflections that you have about it?
Yeah, thanks, Zoe, and good afternoon, everybody. It's a great honor to kind of be here with you all for a little bit today and talk through this. It's a crazy important topic. I had a chance to talk with Sarah Cushman last week. We spent probably a good half hour on the phone and only really scratched it. So I hope, if nothing else, whatever I can provide is helpful, and that you guys all know that I'm here at BMV. We're here to roll up our sleeves and join you all to work on this problem. So just let me offer that in case I get disconnected for some reason. You at least know that I'm in it to win it with you guys. Hey, just a couple quick points. One, Lieutenant Scott's data, fully, we support that. An additional picture, if you were to look back before the e-ticket system came online in 2020, our system only shows an additional 3 tickets levied against drivers. We call them convictions because they come out of traffic court, right? So the tickets turn into a conviction. Only 3 dating back to 2010. The best I can tell, the white cane law came into play in 1999. And so that's just a reflection of the data that's in our system. And that's probably within a subset of about 600 and change total pedestrian related convictions that we have in our system for all drivers going back to 1999. The white cane law is one subsection of about 9 subsections related to pedestrian violations that Maine motor vehicle statutes contain. And I think Lieutenant Scott's comments did a great job of kind of filling in the context of how does that officer approach a situation roadside. So I won't belabor any of that. As Zoe mentioned, part of my team's responsibilities is the oversight of Maine's driver ed schools. There's a couple hundred locations, maybe 50 or so schools, and a couple hundred instructors across the state administering basic Class C driver ed, in addition to commercial driver education and motorcycle education. Our team that does that is a whopping 6 people, of which 1 is vacant right now. So just to give you a sense of, those folks are out on the road. We call them field staff, and I don't see them around the building. I communicate with them digitally because they're always out there checking in on schools. And Tom Barron, who's going to provide some perspective here, he's got a couple hats that I encourage you guys to ping him on. One is his former life as a law enforcement officer, and then his current role at AAA. AAA's a very central role in Maine driver education, in that the curriculum that AAA creates for driver ed here in Maine is the core curriculum that all schools use. Schools might add something or may modify something, but by and large, it's the AAA curriculum. And I will tell you, it is exceptionally professional to the national standard kind of level. So I want you all to take some solace that the AAA curriculum does a pretty solid job of addressing pedestrian driver interactions, or the attempt to avoid interactions, right? We also, the other part of my team is the driver license examiners that administer both written and road exams to applicants. So these are the uniform wearing, sit in the right seat folks are the ones that are proctoring written exams in our test rooms at the BMV branches across the state. Those tests, it's a couple hundred different questions covering all manner of things you learn in driver ed to earn your license. Those test questions are randomly selected by a computer, so not every topic hits every test every time, but it is a good representative sample. It's a 30-question basic written exam. that we use to just sense whether or not the applicant has put their nose in the books before we give them a permit, right? And so between, I think, the driver ed curriculum and our oversight of those schools, both, those schools, are they teaching the right things? We spot check them. We show up at night at 7 o'clock and dial into their Zooms to see if they're actually teaching the right stuff, so what I'd offer to you is, I have confidence in that curriculum, and in most of the schools across the state of Maine do a conscientious job of teaching that curriculum. The challenge is that driver ed is all of 30 hours of academics and 10 hours behind the wheel. And then you're out there trying to get your other 70 hours of time behind the wheel. If you're a parent, you know what I'm talking about. and 6 months of experience before you come forward to face your road test. So what happens in that time between driver ed completion and road test? We see all kinds of different folks come forward by the time they're ready for that road test. I can tell you, having ridden on a couple of road tests, pedestrian zones and pedestrian awareness is absolutely something our examiners are looking for. And it's an express train to fail in your road test if you're not catching pedestrians when they're out in front of you, as it should be, right? So that portion of our program is tuned as well. What I will offer to you, I guess, is those venues that we're plugged into. We can talk about this a little more. I think Zoe's going to come back and ask me a couple of questions, but we're willing and have opportunities to help get the word out. And so I will end there on this question. And then Zoe, when you come back, we can talk some more about that.
Great. Thanks so much, Chris. So Tom, we wanted to bring you in to talk a little bit. And so Tom is a traffic safety education specialist with AAA of Northern New England. And so he's responsible for traffic safety education programs, seminars, and collaborating with state and local agencies. He works in the public affairs office, and he was also a law enforcement officer for 35 plus years here in Maine. And where are you, Tom? Just trying to, I'm not seeing you. If you're, oh, there you are. Okay. Yeah. Tom, if you wanted to come off mute and talk just briefly about your perspective as a traffic safety specialist and also a former law enforcement officer. And I understand that you also have a personal connection with this topic.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm Tom Barron. I'm traffic safety education specialist with AAA Northern New England. And, I do traffic safety education for Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont. I come to this position with a great deal of knowledge in law enforcement. I did, over, 35 years in law enforcement. And so as a patrol officer, then as a supervisor, and then all the way up to the chain of command as a chief deputy. So, traffic safety was always paramount with me, and, always did a little bit of education with it too. I worked as a traffic driving instructor for the state of Maine, the Bureau of Highway Safety. They have a program called the Maine Driving Dynamics. So did that for 25 years. And so big passion for traffic safety. So that's who I am. The personal connection on this is I have a brother who is blind and has been blind since birth. And so I'm very connected with the mobility of, what it's like, and what I saw firsthand from him in getting around and in all the things that, he's done in life and so forth. So there's personal connection. So in that one slide that you showed is one of the slides that I show when I talk to people across New England, basically, and educating them, because there's a lot of things. One of the things I hold up or I have a slide for our senior drivers, anyways, is what's the color of a yield sign? And more than probably 90% of the people will say it's yellow and black. But a yield sign is red and white. And when I show them the red and white sign, they kind of laugh. And so, but what it shows is that things change in our education, or what we learned back, we tend to sometimes forget. So it shows me very much that we all need some kind of a traffic safety education review. And I would say everybody does, but there's no requirements for that unless you have points problems with your license and the state requires you to take a driver improvement class. But there's clearly a lot of things going on in our driving world. And one of the things, obviously, is the distracted driver. And so when we look at, pedestrians on the side of the road, and especially those that would have impaired vision and needing to cross the road, we're dealing with drivers today that are also maybe not paying attention like they should, and the distraction that's going on with them. We need to focus our attention solidly on our driving. That's so paramount in what we do when we drive, because 2 seconds looking away from your driver, you're driving for 2 seconds doubles your chances for being in a crash. So we have to look at everything and what's going on there with our drivers today. And so the focus when we talk about pedestrians, which we've seen a number of pedestrian fatalities in this state, especially last year. Why and looking at them and so forth. But from the driver's perspective, it's paying attention. It's being focused on driving is so very important. The other piece of this is education. We need to be educating the public, and that's what AAA does. We do our How to Drive in the teen driver program that we have, and new drivers. That How to Drive curriculum has probably about 10 pages just on pedestrian movement and right away and so forth. And there is a section in there, on the white cane law and guide dog. And so it's used in every state in the United States. So it's very, very, very usable, and it's got most up-to-date things in it. AAA has their own traffic safety foundation. We do research continually on different aspects of things, and whether it's car technology or other things, or why people aren't doing a good job with walking and pedestrians and so forth, and drivers not seeing pedestrians well enough. There was just, if you go to AAA Foundation for Traffic Safety.org, there's a study on pedestrian fatalities and safety and where they're occurring most and that type of thing. Very much involved, but education is so very paramount here. No question about it.
Thanks so much, Tom. So I wanted to bring in Jason Angel now to talk a little bit about the infrastructure side of things. And so Jason is our state accessibility coordinator for Maine. He's a person with lived experience of disability and works to ensure that all state agencies comply with the Americans with Disabilities Act, Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, the Maine Human Rights Act, and other disability laws. He has a wealth of experience from working at the New England ADA Center. And Jason, Sadie was talking about the effort to get a crosswalk near her house. Can you talk a bit more about the process and support that's available when a pedestrian, particularly someone with disabilities, is working on safety improvements like these?
Sure. Thank you for inviting me into the conversation. Essentially what it starts with is a person with a disability making a reasonable modification request with their municipality. And it sounds like Sadie's already been down that road, but the idea being that this person makes a request for a particular type of modification related to their disability need. Now, in a situation like this, the town would receive that. So maybe if the town has a certain size of employees, they would go to the ADA coordinator if the town of Gorham has one. So you would take a request like that, and then that ADA coordinator would, examine that request to determine if it's feasible. Because then there's a couple of factors when we think about our roadways. Is it a municipal roadway or is it a state roadway? Because then That would require input either from Maine DOT, which there's very adept people as their ADA coordinator there that may be able to help with input on something like that, because they're looking at the public rights of way accessibility guidelines for certain pedestrian facilities. Or if it's a municipality, they could get guidance from Maine DOT, or they could take they may have their own traffic engineers looking at pedestrian facilities as it relates to the 2010 ADA standards for accessible design. So with those factors in mind, you would an ADA coordinator would process that request to determine if it's feasible. If it is feasible, then you're looking at a timeline of planning and design, bidding for the contract, and it's very likely that a project could take 2 to 5 years before completion of a pedestrian facility like that. And if I may, I'd be happy to be a resource in some of these situations, but very, very likely I would refer somebody to some of these other agencies that I did mention, so I can help make some of these connections for folks.
Great. Thank you so much, Jason. So as I think people are probably picking up, one of our goals for today is to introduce you to the folks around the state who can be resources. And so wanting to make sure that people know that, they can ask Jason, they can ask Sharisse if their organizations aren't appropriate. They can point them to other they can point them to the right folks. So we really appreciate you all being here. We are a little over on time. So I think what I'd like to do is do a bit of a round robin with folks, going next to Chris, back to Chris, and then to Sharisse, and then to Sadie, and just talk about how can we work together to build awareness of the white cane law. So Chris, starting with you through driver education. I know you and Sarah talked about some ways that some ideas that you had together of how we could do this. And then I'd like to go to Sharisse for the role that her organization can play, and then to Sadie with some of the more like advocacy type of activities.
Yeah, thanks, Zoe. So as you listen to me, watch Tom Barron. So idea number one is every year we have a driver ed summit, which is hosted by AAA, funded by the Maine Bureau of Highway Safety, and co-engineered by the Bureau of Motor Vehicles and my team. This is a great topic for that summit. And so you would get the driver ed instructors and school owners of Maine pigeonholed in a conference room, a couple hundred of them, for a couple hours to actually drive this point home. So I put that on the table right now. You can see Tom going up and down. We love topics like that. So and that's usually August, September timeframe. The Maine driver ed schools have also organized themselves into 2 associations that are similar in design and purpose. AAA attends those annual gatherings, as does my team at BMV attend those annual gatherings. And I'm sure those communities would love to invite anybody in that would like to talk about this. The instructors in general are thirsty for ways to get kids' attention and to help deliver curriculum with meaningful anecdotes or other people. So I think there's plenty of opportunity there, and we'd love to help connect you guys or whomever would like to come forward into those moments. And then the last idea is if somebody has the ability to develop something like a trifold that fits in a letter envelope, my team on an average week sends out a couple of thousand letters to drivers across the state of Maine. Everything from, hey, here's your appointment notice, so a new driver, for your exam, to you're not such a great driver, and here's your suspension letter, and everything in the middle. That postage is already paid for by you and me and the taxpayers of Maine, and we can slide stuff like this in with those letters without causing it to be more expensive. So this is an example. This is a considerations driving around big trucks that the Commercial Motor Vehicle Safety Alliance and the Maine State Police, they had funds. They made a couple thousand of these, and we shove them in envelopes when they go out the door. So if you guys want to develop something that's white cane oriented, call it the Sadie Says manual. and carry some of those ideas, right? We're happy to put that out. So yeah, we're ready to be part of the solution with you guys. So come forward when you want to talk.
That's excellent. Thank you. I love that. So I'll go to you, Sharisse, for another piece that you wanted to mention about ways to partner. This is sort of like if you had a magic wand, and maybe we don't need it because we got the right folks together today. So maybe we have the wand.
This is Sharisse. So I will say that my role with the Division for the Blind and Visually Impaired is in outreach. I do a lot of that. I do a lot of demonstrations. I do a lot of trainings. I go into businesses and organizations across the state. We do have 11 orientation and mobility instructors across the state that are willing and ready to partner with anybody and everybody and show them the ropes of like, what is it actually like to cross the street under blindfold or under a vision simulator with a white cane in your hand and get those firsthand experiences. Because when you actually do that with an O&M right at your side, you get a really quick, interesting perspective. Obviously, you're just stepping into those shoes very briefly, and then you get you get to take that blindfold off and you take those simulators off and you go about your day, whereas our clients can't do that. But it really hits home. I've done a lot of presentations in Florida with the national state of Maine, state of Florida traffic engineers presentations and conferences where we took traffic engineers out on the I-Drive in Orlando, Florida under blindfold and made them cross I-Drive. So happy and more than willing to come and do presentations at any of statewide conferences, any small towns, anything like that. So we're really excited about that. That's that magic wand that we really want to bring, because it's not just the education and it's not just the clients. It's also those people that are designing the roadways, that are putting up those facilities, because like Jason said, it takes many years for those things to happen. And so we want to get into those ideas and into those public meeting spaces to be able to say, hey, don't forget about the people that are blind and visually impaired in your communities as you're thinking about making some changes along those roadways and those streets and all of those things. So that would be my magic wand and I'm super excited to partner with Chris and with Tom to be able to share more education with those drivers. That's awesome. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Sharisse. So we want to come back to Sadie, and so this is another brief, if you can keep it brief so we have a couple minutes to close us out. Just what's your magic wand wish on this one?
Well, I do have a magic wand. It's a white cane. And thank you, Chris, for that laugh. I'm glad I was on mute. So I think I'm just really excited because I think we do have some great collaboration that I'm hoping will move forward, because my hope was to sort of revitalize something that used to exist, which is a grassroots sort of educational moment that would happen in October where we would partner with a lot of different state agencies and put on what we called the White Cane Walk. This has since kind of become a fundraiser. It still kind of exists, but I would like to get it away from being a fundraiser and back to being an educational teaching moment. Basically, the short description would be that it was basically a sidewalk parade that happened. We would run it from like Monument Square in Portland down to like Deering Oaks Park area, and there would be several street crossings that would happen, and we'd have this nice parade of folks with white canes, guide dogs, and other sighted folks helping out from different agencies and related folks, and we'd have signs, and it would be almost like a sort of like a protest march almost, but an educational march, and we would have the police help stop traffic, and that way motorists could see us. News channels would come out and see us and do stories. And then we might have some little presentations or some educational booths, things like that. I'd kind of like to bring that back. That's a goal of mine for this year, just that it can be a kind of high visibility event, in Portland or any other main cities that want to do it. Obviously got to start somewhere, but I'm also really excited about getting more of this driver education out, because I really do think that being recognized as a blind person and having folks understand what our needs are is going to be the most important piece.
Great. Thank you so much, Sadie. Well, I just want to say thanks to all of our cast of characters today. This was a great one. We have a couple minutes for questions. If there's anybody in the participant pool if you want to just raise your hand if you have a question, and I'll call on you. And we sometimes do breakout rooms, which we like to call carpool conversations. We're not going to do that today because we just don't have the time. But I would invite folks, if they haven't already found their way to our mobility action meetups. We do those the second and fourth Fridays of the month on Zoom. They're from noon to 1. And it's a great way to plug in and get to give and receive support around different advocacy interests. And, it's everybody from folks focused on getting safer crossings to getting volunteer driver programs going. And so it's a great way to build your relationships and your knowledge. So, but I do see we have a question from Katie, if you want to go ahead.
Hi, thanks. This is Katie, and I'm actually asking more what a question from my personal life. It's just it's great information today and new to me, and I was just thinking about, what could I do, and maybe like just sharing information with my friends and contacts. So I was wondering if there is an organization or a source of like social media type posts, like pre-constructed posts about this, that's available for folks to share, or a certain organization I could look to share information that's already been shared.
Yeah, and that's a great question. And I think that sort of relates to Chris's offer of a, if we had a brochure, it could go out. And so I don't know if anybody knows the answer to that. Yeah, Chris, do you want to speak to whether those things exist currently?
Yeah, I sorry, I jumped the gun. I had a different thought. I'm not sure I have a good answer for Katie, but I'll mull on it. And if I think of something, I'll fling it out to you guys.
Yeah, and I would just say it sounds like there'll be a few of us who follow up after this and identify what's needed to be able to make these things happen. So yeah, Chris, if you want to go ahead, and then I see Julie.
I just, something Sarah and I talked about this the other night. The Maine Bureau of Highway Safety talks about safe systems. And so, Sharisse and Jason kind of hit off this a little bit in the sidewalk discussion, but they have a council that they bring together, includes DOT, roadway engineers, probably includes Department of Labor and some other folks, but I think they're a great collaborative venue. They have access to grant funding and some other things. So, and I don't know that we've got anybody represented here. As I was scanning the names, I didn't catch one that I recognized, but I think that's another agency. And, AAA works closely with them. We work closely with them. It's a good focal point from a state of Maine, and they have a lot of threads, and Lauren Stewart loves to help out on things like this. So just offering that as well. If you guys need connections, let me know.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I see Julie put her hand down. So feel free to reach out to me after today and I can route questions. So it's just zoe@movingmaine.org. Very appreciative of all of you for being here today. And we look forward to making some of these things happen together. So this was a pretty exciting one, sharing information today and then also identifying some great ways to partner. So thank you, everybody. And I hope you all take good care, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
So much, everybody.
Thanks for